Hello. Thank you for joining us for another Shining Light on Shadows, a candid conversation about mental health. Our guest this week is Sara Wilson, and our focus is on teen girls and therapy. My name is Neil Parekh, and my co host is Don Helmrich Neuburg. I'm going to keep remembering to get that Newberg in there. Um, we are live on Facebook, Twitter, LinkedIn, YouTube, Instagram, as I hit the buttons to my sides, and my website. Please like, comment, share, retweet, do all the things that you do on social media to make sure people see the show. I understand someone else is doing a show this evening that may be getting some attention, a certain President Joe Biden. So if you need a break from that, hopefully you come over here. Or if you're watching the replay, uh, you're watching from the very beginning. So thank you for that. Dawn, I can't tell you how excited I am to have Sara on the show.
Me too. Me
Three
too.
way people on the show. Sara and I were colleagues at United Way of Snohomish County. Feels like years ago. She was actually my hire. I hired Sara to be on our team, and think the world of her. And she left United Way, after I had moved to DC, but she left to become a therapist. And her focus is on teen girls and young adults. And it's just going to be such a great conversation. I think she's our first therapist that we've had on the show. We had Coach Ambrose talking about mindfulness last time, but I believe Sara's our first therapist, right?
I believe so. I believe so.
Yeah, and we have a few others coming up as well. So this is a little bit of a shift for us in terms of the show. Up till now, most of our guests have shared their own experiences, their own challenges with mental health, whether it's being an introvert or workplace depression, dealing with family members, etc. But this is the first time that we are going to be having a therapist share a little bit about their practice and what they're hearing, what they're seeing. I want to do a quick announcement first before we get too long, because I know that last time I forgot until the very end to thank our sponsors, and I certainly want to do that. As you know, the show is supported pro bono by Digimentors, the consulting firm that I'm a part of. We do digital marketing, events and digital programs, strategic communications, trainings, and workshops. And I know that Sri is watching on Instagram, watching from New York City while awaiting Biden's press conference. Sri, thank you very much. And I want to make a specific point, Don. The support that I've gotten from our team, not just in terms of the number of people who watch and help and share the show, but just giving me the time and space to uh, work on the show, to write the blog post, to use our tools has been tremendous. So, Sri, thank you very much. And I know that he personally is invested and um, has supported this journey. So that means a lot. It really does. Um, we have a few people who are watching who are checking in. Jonathan is saying hi. Jonathan, thank you very much. Rochelle is watching from Hastings on Hudson. Rochelle will be a guest in September. She is a neighbor of ours from my hometown. And not in Hastings on Hudson is my mom, who's watching from Fort Lee, because my sister is in the New York area. So she's spending some time. And I'm glad, Mom, I'm glad you're feeling a little bit better. She had been sick the last several weeks. And I'm glad that you're doing okay. We will be seeing her next Friday. We can talk a little bit more about that later. A few other guests. I'm going to let you do the honors on this one, Dawn.
Yes, my very best friend Kate is joining us from downstairs from where I live. She owns the place that my husband and I live in. We live upstairs. She lives downstairs. She has been talking about how excited she's been for this topic for a while. She works with children, so I think this will be really good for her. And then my
Great.
sweet, darling, wonderful, lovely husband from Milwaukee. who
Over
is
there somewhere, right?
from
You
over
can
in the
point.
other room. He's on the couch right now. And he gave me such a sweet compliment. Thank you, honey. I love you.
Thank you, Jim, and congratulations again. You just celebrated your 1 month anniversary, if
We
I'm not mistaken,
did.
right?
We did. Married for 1 month. So
What's the gift for 1 month?
um
So that
I don't know.
you don't know. Jim, get on
It was
that.
his birthday. It was his birthday, so he got all kinds of gifts.
Uh,
So we'll just
I see.
say movies
Okay,
was one.
well, the JDaw
Yes.
film festival that you do,
Yes. Yes. Yes.
right?
We have one of those coming up. Yes.
That's cool. That's cool. That's
Yeah.
the Jim Dawn festival. They call it the JDaw Film Festival. So thank you. Still, still together after all these days. Jim, you sound surprised about that, which I don't think that's we won't go there. Don't worry.
Nope.
So what I want to do is a little bit different. We've talked about our show. We've talked about why we do this. Mainly to reduce the stigma around mental health. And this episode we want to shine a light on some of the issues that come up for teen girls and young adults in Sarah's practice. So I wanted to point people to the blog post that she wrote, um, navigating the roller coaster: themes that teen girls explore in therapy. uh, Friendships and social media, body image and self-esteem, academic stress, depression, anxiety and eating disorders, gender exploration and self discovery, sexual assault and recovery. Um, what an incredible list and incredible framework for our discussion. So, Sarah, welcome to the show.
Thank you. I'm so glad to be here.
Absolutely. So glad to have you here and again in person. I've been looking forward to having you on the show for
Me too.
months and months and months. Like one of the first people I reached out to shared this crazy idea that we're doing, and just the idea that you'd be able to share, kind of what you've been seeing in your practice.
Mhm.
Um, so let's dive right into it.
That sounds great. And that
Talk
the
about,
graphic you brought up with the themes I see in my practice, I'll run through those things. But what we didn't
please.
talk about is the TikToks that we watch, the tea that we spill, the gossip we talk about. Therapy with teen girls is hilarious. Not for the faint of heart. There's very serious, big things. And also sometimes I'm just laughing so hard because
I'm sure.
I love working with teen girls. They're a wonderful demographic. And it's very fulfilling personally as a therapist to work with teen girls.
That's good.
I think a few, and I mentioned this in the blog, and definitely go check that out, as well as Neil and Dawn's. They're wonderful blogs too. The things that I hear the most, it's a lot of it is things about friendships, social media. We'll talk about this in a little bit, but when you're a teenager, in your brain, your wiring, the drive to fit in is as strong biologically as your drive for food and water. I don't know if you knew that. I think that's wild. That's wild to me when I first learned that. So the drive to fit in, do my friends like me? Am I fitting in? Am I blending in? Things like that. Or am I being unique? Am I being an individual? That's a really big topic for teenage girls and one that can bring a lot of anxiety and a lot of strife. So we talk about that quite a bit. Now, that has been true for teenage girls for time immemorial, but I think especially now with social media. Can you imagine? I mean, Dawn, you were a teenage girl too. Can you imagine being a teenage girl on social media?
Absolutely not. Gosh, Jim and I talk about this all the time. Just as we were growing up, we're so thankful that social media did not exist for
I
all of the
know.
things that would have been even harder.
I think I had an angsty live journal. And then later on, when in college, I think I had a MySpace. And then I went to the University of Washington when Facebook was available. When you were at university, I finally got on Facebook and it was so exciting. But I was older. I was 19, 20 at that point. I cannot imagine these clients that I see who I just adore. I can't imagine being 13 and navigating life on social media, as well as just how difficult life is as a teenage girl. It's wild to me. So we talk a lot about that too.
It
We talk
wouldn't
a
have
lot.
been easy for guys either. I
Oh,
mean,
you're right.
that's
You're
certainly,
totally
and
right.
we're focusing on teenage girls for this episode intentionally.
Mhm.
But Pam and I joke about how the internet was barely a thing when we first started dating in college. So it really is a whole different world out there.
Right, and you guys had dinosaurs you rode to school, like, it was
I
just a
know, right?
world back then, it was
Uphill
wild.
both ways. That's hard on a dinosaur.
Oh my gosh, tell me about it. So we talk a lot about that. We talk a lot about online safety. How do you know who you're talking to, who you're Snapchatting is a real person? Unfortunately, teenage girls get asked for nudes a lot. And so we talk about that and navigating that. And it's a Pandora's box. So that comes up a lot. I talk about that almost every day in my office. Another thing we talk a lot about is body image and self-esteem. And Dawn, your blog spoke so beautifully about this. So I can't wait for you to talk about this too. But this is such a big topic for teen girls. A thing that's really impactful right now and something I love, it's the health at every size movement. And a lot of this work talks about being healthy in the body you have, and embracing body neutrality, body acceptance. Because I think 10 years ago it was the Dove campaigns. It was all about self-love and love your body. That message for a lot of teenage girls or a lot of young people in general can be really alienating if that's not where they're at. And so when we talk about body image and self-esteem, a lot of it's body neutrality, or I like my arms because they give good hugs, things like that. And so we try to rewire brains quite a bit in my practice with that idea. Another thing that comes up quite a bit that Neil, I know this resonated with your daughter, Emily, it's academic stress and the pressure to succeed at school. A lot of girls have that pressure from home, and a lot of girls put that pressure on themselves. I think in a world where everything is changing for them, their bodies, their emotions, their friend groups, sometimes girls or young people focus on what they can control, and sometimes that's their grades. And they really also identify with this idea of I'm an A+ student. And if they fall short of that, because we all do sometimes, it can be really hard on them. So we talk about that too.
Sure.
And then most of the girls that end up on my couch are girls that come in because there's mental health concerns. Sometimes I see teenagers who are just here to talk to someone, but usually this is therapy. This is a real thing. And so it's a lot of mental health concerns. It's girls that have diagnosed anxiety, depression, eating disorders, OCD, PTSD, things like that. And so a lot of my work, I would say most of my work with teens, revolves around getting to the root of these issues, looking at these thoughts that they have, if they're helpful or not, changing their behaviors, changing their patterns, looking at the impacts their family are having on them and the impacts they're having on their family, because we're all connected in a system. So a lot of that work happens in therapy too. And then a big theme with every teenager in general, it's finding their identity. And now this has been true for teens forever. Teens love to kind of plant their flag in something. I'm the cheerleader. I'm the goth. I'm the nerd. I have purple hair. I'm edgy, just all these different identities. Increasingly, though, in our society, it's safe for them to explore gender and sexuality. And I know there are many opinions about this. I would argue this is a good thing, because teens have been exploring their gender and sexuality since time immemorial. But now that it's okay and safer to talk about, the rates of suicide in these populations are lower, which I think is a wonderful thing. So when we're talking about exploration and identity exploration, everything's on the table now for teens, which is kind of exciting. We talk a lot about coming out and what that looks like, and staying safe if you do identify as queer and things like that. It's really exciting work. And then an unfortunate reality is sexual assault and recovery from assault. And I know that you talk about that quite a bit on your show. I'm so glad you do. We need to have as many open dialogues as we can about this. Many teenage girls go through this. There's a statistic from RAINN that I really like. We can link it. Is that sexual assault in teenage girls and young women, especially ages 16 and 19, they're 4 times more likely than the general population to be victimized, which is really sobering and really scary. Yeah. And that is a theme that I work with very, very often. And the trauma revolving around that, and the child advocacy that revolves around that, supporting teens when they have to go to court, supporting them through the healing process, things like that. And so that takes up a lot of my work too. But like I said, this is heavy things, but it's not always that heavy. Sometimes it's TikToks. Sometimes sometimes they come in and they flop on my couch and they say, I've had a terrible day, give me candy. And then we just kind of talk. And it's an extreme privilege to be a safe person for young people. I love this job so much.
That's so cool. I have one question before we go to Dawn. When you started your practice, when you went into, I think it was Antioch that you went to, right? Did you know that you wanted to work with teen girls from the beginning? And is that kind of where everything was geared toward?
Yeah. Growing up, I was involved with a nonprofit called Rainbow Girls.
Of course, I remember.
Yeah, it's an amazing organization for girls 11 to 20. And when I was a young adult, I volunteered quite a bit with Rainbow Girls too. Yeah. And that led me to this passion of working with teen girls. So when I went to Antioch, Seattle, I did have the intention of working with teen girls. And that certainly has been a big part of my practice, but it's also evolved. I work with women too quite a bit. I work with younger kids too quite a bit. And I didn't go into this thinking that that would be the case, but I love different ages on the spectrum. But I think my favorite work that I do is with teen girls, and that has been my heart all along.
That is great.
Yeah.
So Dawn, I want to bring you into the conversation, and ask, and really with your blog post, and we can tee that up first. But really think through how Sarah's blog post kind of resonated with you. Your blog post was about the negative self-talk. The negative self-talk started in high school. It continues to this day. You're referring to yourself at that point. Finding the right way to love yourself should definitely begin between the ages of 13 and 23, and certainly not wait until you are 52. Um, Tell us what Sarah's kind of framing brought up for you.
Yeah, for sure. First and foremost, anybody who knows me knows that I'm very emotional and a crier. And this topic really hits hard for me because growing up, I did not have a very good self-image. I did not think I was pretty. I did not think, as I was hitting puberty, I felt uncomfortable in my own skin. My mom was overweight and did not have a good self-image of herself either, and so I really learned a lot of behaviors from that. And I never learned how to love the skin that I'm in. And I have a 23-year-old daughter, and I have been scolded by her many times that I have not been the best role model for her in terms of body image. She struggles as well because of the way that I negatively talk about my weight and my looks, and it's really disheartening. And I think in my blog I allude to the fact that it's kind of torturous to consistently look at yourself and not like what you see when you look in the mirror. And now that I'm 52 and I'm in menopause, I'm really trying to retrain my brain to see something other than just every negative flaw, every, my size, and, my smile and my eyes and my hair, and because all of those things are changing and they're going to continue to change. And I don't have any control over that. Yeah, I can exercise, I can eat healthy, and I do all those things. But physically, my body is going to be different, and it's a consistent struggle for me to recognize that. And when I read Sarah's blog, I just kept thinking in my head, gosh, if I could have just tackled this between the ages of 13 and 23, if I could have just known or figured out a way to talk about this, or to understand different ways to look at things, I think that my life and the way in which I view myself would have been very different. And I also, most people know that I was raped when I was 21. So I didn't even get to get through that brain development before I experienced this incredibly traumatic experience that I think also affected my body image and my self-worth tremendously. So, so I apologize to my daughter, who I don't think is watching right now, but if she was, I apologize to her, because I do know that had to be incredibly damaging for her in the way that she views herself. And I love her tremendously and hate that she was affected by that. So.
But Dawn, you're doing this work now. which is beautiful. And it sounds like she is noticing and doing this work too, which is wonderful that she's empowered to do this. And
Yes.
I want to just say, I want to throw you a bone too. And for anyone else listening, if you're a survivor of sexual assault, any age group, but I think also especially in this 13 to 23, body image is really tricky then too, because your body has been an unsafe place. Your body has let you down. And so I want to make sure you're not internalizing this as something that's your fault and you woulda, coulda, shoulda, because I think you're doing it now, which I think is incredible.
Well, thank you. I appreciate the sentiment, and I do feel as though anytime that you make a realization and work on yourself should be celebrated, and
Yeah.
you should appreciate the ability to be able to do that. So
Yeah.
Well, and I'll say that Dawn has always been a inspiration for me. You know, I before this we started this show, I never would have talked about my own mental health in any kind of public forum. It's from Dawn's constant posting. It makes it easier for other people. It normalizes it for other people, Dawn. And I'll say that I have really benefited from that because it's easier for me now when I go through a difficult period. And the month of June was a difficult period for me, just several weeks of various issues. Um, but one of the things that I did, and for folks watching, you know, some of you might know that there's an email list that I use to help promote the show and a Sunday show that we produce, the New York Times read along. Um, I put a note in those emails, and I was able to say that I've been having a difficult week, that I'm dealing with anxiety and depression, and the response I got was incredible. You know, people that I know professionally, not just friends and family that you know you would think would reach out, but people that I know kind of in a professional context, not only responded to the email, but then a few days later sent me a follow up just to say, "Hey, are you okay? I was just checking in on you." Um,
Yeah.
that's a gift, Dawn, and I want to thank you
Mhm.
for that.
thank you for saying that, Neil. And I just want to acknowledge that there was a comment that men also have body issues, and I have a son who um, is thin, and says that that's very difficult too, to be a male who is thinner, and he's talked about that as well. So I would agree 100% that this is not just about girls. It just so happens we're focusing on teen girls, but that body image, all of the things that Sarah's talked about, I think resonate with teen boys as well, just in, I think, maybe in a slightly different
Yep.
way.
No, Helm, thank you so much for commenting that. I agree, especially gay youth. Yes, this is a very big thing. I let me come back talk about teenage boys because that's
Yeah,
so everything we're saying applies to teenage boys
sure.
too. And I wish we had time to talk about both, but we're focusing on the girls now
And
and female identifying youths. But Helm, thank you for saying that. It's so true.
51-year-old boys as well. There's got a little bit of an extra belly there.
Fair.
I never
Fair.
used to have. It's real talk, right? And like I walk by, I see my reflection in the window, and I'm like, holy crap, what happened? Like what, that's not, or like a picture where the shirt's just a little tighter than you want it to be, or the angle is just not good. It's just like, ugh. It's real. And I don't think men talk about that as much. I mean, that could be a whole different
A show in
conversation.
and of itself.
Yeah.
While we're looking at comments, why don't we just bring in a few other folks? Apollo is watching from Philadelphia, and he goes by his middle name sometimes, but he's another colleague of mine from Digimentor, so it's a great example of how my work colleagues have really supported the show. Next week's guest is also watching, Dawn.
I saw that.
Say a word about Sam.
Yeah, so Samantha Collier is a dear friend of mine, an advocate and a survivor, and she says, "Yes, Don Helmrich, so true." And I think that she was talking about the whole idea of body image and how frustrating it is.
Yeah.
So
Yeah.
we love you, Sam. We're excited to have you on the show next week or in 2 weeks.
Alexis, or 2 weeks. Alexis says you do help. I think that's when I was talking about the work that you did, the inspiration you gave me. My friend Jonathan says, I remember too many comments about being unusually thin when growing up. Jonathan as well. Thank you, Jonathan. And Kate says, thank you for all this. It gives me a new perspective on dealing with the teen moms I work with. That's really
Fabulous.
great. Teen moms, that's there's a lot there. And I know Kate has to deal with that at work.
Wow.
So I'll jump in, Sarah, again, singing your praises. I read your blog post and I was just floored because to me, I saw um, a blueprint, a framework for talking with Emily, who is now 11. You met her when she was little squish, just I think 1 month old for her baby shower at United Way of Snohomish County,
My gosh.
and
Cute.
and now she's 11 years old, going into 6th grade, just at the the younger end of that range you talked about, the 13 to 23 range. And that was an interesting juxtaposition with Dawn's daughter being at the other end of that range. I think your comment was that her prefrontal cortex has developed, or it's just about developed. It's
Doesn't have
close.
a squishy brain anymore.
Doesn't
Yeah.
have a squishy brain. Emily's brain is still a little squishy.
Yes.
But and we actually just last weekend we saw Inside Out 2
Oh,
with Emily and a friend. And for folks, if you're not familiar with the movie, it's an animated movie about the emotions in our brains, in our minds, kind of how they control us and kind of how they play out in different scenarios. Uh, you know, the first movie, I'll just say, joy, fear, anger, disgust are joined overnight when puberty starts, and we're not quite there yet, but we're close. Anxiety, envy, embarrassment, ennui, and so I was able to use your blog post, Sarah, to talk to Emily about all of these issues.
awesome.
Everything that you wrote about, the social jungle, I was able to relate it to kind of her friends in school, in real life, how it may play out in social media. We're still holding off on not getting her a smartphone. She's on YouTube more than we want her to be, but we're keeping her off of anything that you can chat or friend people with. And and I do want to mention that Sri wrote a great Substack. His newsletter was all about how social media is the new cigarettes. So it all comes together. But I was able to talk to her about friendships and social media. I was able to talk to her about body image. And even as an 11-year-old, like if you know the song Victoria's Secret from a couple of years ago, we could talk to her about it then, when she was 9 years old. And it was just great. The academic stress is the real one that I think she related to. And it was really interesting because it's not something we don't put that kind of stress on her, because I didn't grow up with that kind of stress in the Indian community. Other parents did. My parents didn't. Not in the same way. My dad was kind of the black sheep of the family. He was smart. He didn't have to study. All of his brothers hated him for that. Not hated him, but kind of ribbed him for it. I still remember a family get together where he told all the nieces and nephews, "Don't worry, have fun in school. Don't pay so much attention to grades." And if looks could kill, all the uncles and aunties were glaring at him. No, what he really means is that you should study hard. But you gave me an opening to talk to her about depression and anxiety. Eating disorder is something we've talked to her about because we know people who've had eating disorders. And so it's something we're very sensitive about. The gender exploration and self-discovery, her comment as soon as I brought it up, "Oh, I know all the flags."
I love that.
I'm like, "What are you talking about, all the flags?" Like, I never knew anything about this when I was 11. Dawn, did it when you were this age? Did you have any understanding? I mean, you might have growing up in a different
not
area.
not until my junior year of high school, when I went to an art school. where we had a lot of people with different gender identities, and it was a safe space for them to be in and to talk about. And even then, there were individuals that were not out as being gay, that came out as being gay much later in life, that were in a safe space, and it still wasn't a safe enough space.
Yeah.
The last topic you brought up, Sarah, sexual assault. It's very personal to me as well. Dawn shared earlier, and she talks. She's very open about it. I actually talked about being abused by a neighbor when I was 7, before I talked about my anxiety and depression in terms of public conversation and sharing online. Last year, I co-hosted a show with Candice Sanchez, a mutual friend for Dawn and I. Um, Season 3 of her podcast, Unspoken Conversations with Candice. Season 3 focused on male survivors of sexual abuse, and every month we interviewed a different guy who dealt with this at various ages in their life. Mental health kept coming up. That's really where this show came from, because it kind of, I was inspired and kind of motivated to talk about mental health because we did that. But the interesting thing is that when I came out with my story last year, I sat Emily down and told her about it in ways that she could understand, because, this little, pain in my rear, Emily, I love her so much, but she Googles me every now and then. She and her friends come home and Google their parents to see what they can find. And she knew I had a website, and she knew I had a YouTube channel, and she saw like old videos that I'd like, just random stuff I was playing around with. But I knew that if I started this show and did a blog post and we talked about it, she would stumble on it and watch it herself. And so I sat down and explained to her what happened. And again, your including that in your framework helped me have another conversation with her when she was a little bit older. So I can't thank you enough. I really can't.
I'm so glad, Neil. And I just want to validate too. I'm so glad you talked to her about this. And I want to validate for parents of teens and younger how hard it is to have that conversation about sexual assault, but how important it is. And do it age appropriate. There's books you can buy, but just making it not a queasy thing to talk about, but just talking about, with little kids, we'll talk about red flag touches, green flag touches, things like that. I always recommend that parents, when kids are very little, start using anatomically correct terms for private parts.
Sure.
Things that has been shown statistically to help with safety for young people. Because if we don't talk about it, sometimes they don't know what's happening is wrong. And so Emily's age and younger is a perfect time to start talking about this. And if you haven't yet, and you have older kids too, and they're teenagers, it's also a good time to talk about it and make sure they know, hey, if anything ever happens, I'm a safe person. You can come tell me, or tell a teacher, or tell whoever you need to, but I'm here for you and I believe you. That can be so powerful. So I'm so glad that the blog was a jumping off point to be able to talk to her about that again. Good job.
It really was. Just the minute, as soon as I read it, it just kind of was all clear to me. This is what I can do with it. I want to let people know we're about halfway through this episode 10 of Shining Light on Shadows. Sara Wilson, a licensed marriage and family therapist. That's what those letters are. LMFT. Congratulations on that. Is our guest. We're focusing on teen girls and therapy. And if you have questions for Sara or comments, please let me know. We will put it on the screen. Before we go to comments, Dawn, did you want to jump in with something?
Yeah, I did. I just, Sara, again, reading your blog post, I highly recommend for anybody who's watching right now, for anybody who, might watch later on, please read that blog post. And if you have children at any age, this is such a good conversation starter. Pick one of the topics that she talks about. If you recognize something, in your kid, like I said, even my 23-year-old whose brain isn't as squishy as it was before. My first thing was, I really want to have a conversation with her about acknowledging, my missteps. And we've talked about it before, but I feel like I it resonated with me again. So I would highly recommend. And then the other thing that I was going to say, because I wanted to ask you this question, Sarah, when you were talking about the academic stresses, I was actually thinking about my son, not my daughter, because my son said something so profound to me when he started high school. He said, it's so difficult to be as good as everybody wants you to, because when you start out at a 4.0, you can only go down from there.
Oh
And
yeah.
I just I never thought about it in that realm, right? Like the idea of failing, the way the system is set up, is so great, because if you don't maintain that A across the board, anytime you get anything less than that, your grade point goes down.
Yeah.
And for my kid, that was just like he had a fear of failure complex. And so for him, it was just terrifying that
Yes.
the system was set up for him to fail.
Yes.
And
And
I was
I
just
think,
curious to what you've seen.
oh, and that's so profound that he said that. I think that's so accurate. How some young people feel that way. I think teens also tend to think in black and white and absolutes sometimes, with some things. And so grades I've seen being a big part of that. I either am 4.0 or I'm a trash student and I'm not going to try. And so just challenging that and saying, well, what if a 3.6 is okay? And that's even talking about kids that do well in school and their brains work for school. I would say public school in our country is not set up for all kinds of learners. It's set up for one or two kinds of learners. And so if you're outside of that realm of learning, or if you're neurodivergent, or if you have a learning disability, this can be tied a lot to your self-esteem. So if I don't get a perfect score, I'm going to fail. Or if I can't even pass a class because I don't have the right support structure at school, then I'm a bad person. That is very, very normal. And it's heartbreaking to see, isn't it?
It's horrible. It's
Yeah.
horrible. I've talked before on the show that, at one point in time, my son said, society is not set up for a brain like mine.
Oh,
Um,
yes.
yeah,
Yes.
and he's neurodivergent and
Mhm.
and an introvert and very squirrely, right? And to sit in a classroom, to have to be quiet, to not be able to move around, to not
Mhm.
vocalize his fears or feelings or anxieties. School was tremendously difficult for him. He was a very good student, but it was because of his fear of failure. But it was not set up for him.
No, and the effort it took for him to be a good student, he probably had to work 5 times harder than a neurotypical kid.
Yeah.
I think historically too, neurodivergent teens, the focus on them and the treatment for them has been how to make you normal and how to make you fit into the normal school structure and how to make you fit in. I'm really heartened to see that that's changing a little bit. And now there are all across the country, there are a lot of alternative schools that are popping up, collectives, things like that, that provide really quality education. And a lot of them are through the school district. So it's free. So if you have a child that struggles with this, I recommend you look into it, look at your school district website, go to good old Google. But there are a lot of schools and resources that, instead of trying to force our kids who have different brains into this small box so they succeed whatever traditional success looks like in school, it's more expansive for them now. And I'm so happy to see that, because it's making their self-esteem better. It's making their education better. It's just good all around.
That's great to hear. We didn't have those options even as soon as 6-7 years ago. So that's
Yep.
really great.
Absolutely.
We have several other guests I want to bring in terms of comments. Sam says, I love you all. This is an amazing space. Thank you. Sam, thank you so much. We are so glad that you will be joining us next for our next show. While we have you, Samantha Collier will be our guest on episode 11. We'll be focusing on thriving and surviving after rape and sexual abuse. So we're not taking easy topics or light topics on this show. Both Dawn and I are survivors, and as Candice would like to remind us, we're thrivers. So we'll be joined by Samantha Collier on July 25th for our next episode. We also have a couple other comments. I know Rochelle said that I adore Pixar's Inside Out, Inside Out 2. Recommend them to everyone, not just kids. Emotional literacy is key for us all. Absolutely. Alexis says it's a great movie as well. My mom says, very good guest. Sarah, you're a very good guest.
Thank you, Mom.
Who has explained different issues around mental health, and in particular, body image is very important. Absolutely. Absolutely agree. On YouTube, we have a question for you. How does Sarah, Emmy asks, and if you know Emmy, let us know. How does Sarah manage conversations with teen girls who want to remove their healthy breasts? Of all the body image issues, this is heartbreaking because it's irreversible.
Emmy, that's an excellent question. I'm so glad you asked that. Something really special about therapy is that this is a safe place. This room is a safe place to talk about anything. And as long as they don't, the confidentiality is very important to me. As long as I'm not hearing about them hurting themselves, a child getting hurt, them hurting others, things like that, everything is on the table. And so if I do have some teens that have body dysmorphia, and whether or not they identify as female or not, sometimes girls, I don't know if any of you listening remember when you were young and you just went through puberty early and suddenly you had large breasts when you were in 6th grade. It's terrible. It's awful. It's humiliating. It's uncomfortable. And so whether or not it's a gender-based thing or not, a lot of girls do talk about this. Any medical intervention is a very personal issue between the child and their parents. And I don't have a stance on it in here. It's a safe place to talk about it. What we do talk about, though, is different ideas of how they can cope with that. If there are different clothes that make them feel more comfortable, there are products called binders that kind of help flatten your chest. We talk about safety with those, making sure you're getting the right size, so you're not compressing your ribs and your organs and things like that. Different things that are less permanent than removing them. But again, therapy is a safe place. If a teen comes in and says, I'm getting surgery, my parents are fine with it, I don't have a stance. I support them and we talk through their feelings and their emotions. But Emmy, it is heartbreaking because sometimes, since you're talking about the squishy brain, which we should talk about in a second, there can be this impulsion to make these life-changing decisions when your brain hasn't fully formed yet. And then it's irreversible. It can be very hard. So it's a very delicate topic and it's one that comes up a lot, actually. I'm glad you asked that. Now, when we talk about squishy brain, I want to talk about what that means.
Please do.
So your brain is always squishy. It's not like it suddenly gets hard when you mature. But I love the term squishy brain because your prefrontal cortex, this is the smart part right here, that can control impulses, that can have logic, A plus B equals C. If I drive crazy down the street, I might get into a car crash. That is the part of your brain that really is very smart and very mature and very adult. This part of your brain doesn't fully form in girls until they're 23 to 24, and in boys until they're 24 to 25. Sorry, Neil. And so this brain is the reason that we see a lot of teens with impulsive behavior, risky decisions, or just kind of a blank stare when you're asking about consequences, like, oh, I didn't know that was going to happen. So if you are living with a young person and that's happening and you want to pull your hair out, just know this is biological. It's going to get better in a couple of years. Hang in there. But it can be a really interesting and kind of sometimes a scary thing with teens. It can be very impulsive because their brain hasn't fully formed yet, especially the part of the brain that is very mature and understands consequences.
Thank you for that explanation, Sarah. Sometimes, and I didn't want us to get too sciencey on the show, but sometimes you need a little science to explain what's going on. Yeah. There we go. I want to just acknowledge a few folks who are watching on Instagram. So I mentioned Sri earlier. Tracy Wickett, who is a United Way executive from Texas, is watching us. So thank you, Tracy, former colleague from Deep South Texas. And I think it's Tricia Schroeder from Washington State. My cousin Chintan is watching under the Urban Geek. And Robin Turner, a friend of ours from Seattle. She was in our parents group when we lived in Seattle when Emily was first born. A great photographer as well. So Robin, thank you so much for watching. We're having an amazing conversation with Sara Wilson. We're talking about a range of different issues. I want to bring up some data points that Dawn collected to kind of help frame, give a different perspective on these subjects. Dawn, do you want to walk us through this one?
Sure. So the 7 things to know about a teen's brain, and Sarah, you can confirm or deny this. This came from the National Institute of Mental Health. That teen brains may respond differently to stress. That because the teen brain is still developing, they may respond to stress differently than adults do, which could increase teens' chances of developing stress-related mental health issues like anxiety and depression. Recognizing possible triggers and practicing effective coping techniques can help deal with stress, and how to manage stress. Got to keep going, Neil.
Yeah. And then the World Health Organization. So I didn't pull all of the 7 things, but
Oh,
just a
gotcha. Okay,
snippet.
I thought there was
Um,
more.
sure. And then you also had some interesting stats from the World Health Organization.
Yes, and these are global stats, so I'm sure there's more local ones, but globally, 1 in 7 10 to 19-year-olds experience a mental health disorder, accounting for about 13% of global burden of disease in this age group.
And I
And
want to
depression,
raise my hand. I wonder what year that was from, because we
yes,
hear a lot about the mental health crisis in our youth since COVID. So I wouldn't be surprised if it's higher now,
Sure.
depending on when that was
it
taken.
is definitely, and I do believe that this is 2021, so it's probably 2020 data, I would imagine, so probably
Mhm,
pre-pandemic.
mhm.
So it probably is higher than that.
Yeah.
Depression, anxiety, and behavioral disorders are among the leading causes of illness and disability among adolescents, and suicide is the 4th leading cause of death among 15 to 29-year-olds.
Yeah.
Great. Thank you, Don, for sharing that. Um, Before we go into some of the data points that we share in each of our shows, I have a quick announcement that I wanted to share that I'm very excited about. We've mentioned it a few times on the show, but for folks who are watching, and we'll reach out to people by email as well, we have, I'll say, finally started our Shining Light on Shadows Facebook group. Um, we have the idea is to continue the conversation. That's the homepage. We got up the cover image and the title. Now we just need people to come in there to join us. This is going to be a private Facebook group for folks. We're also looking to set up a public facing page so we can share some of that data and other content. But the idea around the Facebook group is to allow us to continue the conversation in between shows on whatever topic you want to cover. You don't necessarily need to talk about stick to the topic of the previous show, but we are trying to build community here. We're trying to build support for each other,
Mm,
and people have shared some very personal insights in the comments during the show when we've talked about various issues. So we want to give folks a time and place and a space to continue that. So I'm going to drop a link to the Facebook group. Um, Please join. I will approve your requests, of course, and at some point maybe we'll add like a question. Have you watched a show, etc. So we can keep it again. We want to make sure that it's people who've watched the show or friends of the show that we have a relationship with, so that it's a safe space. So thank you for that. I'll just drop the link in now. Um, Um, and then we also have our standard stats that we share. Dawn, if you can walk through those as well, that would be great.
Sorry
Dawn,
about that, Neil.
yeah, go ahead. No problem.
I just froze for a half a second. So
No worries. No worries.
um, yeah. So according to NAMI, 1 in 5 adults suffer or have suffered from mental illness at some point in time in their lives. This is a stat that we show every time we have a show because I think it just re-solidifies the fact of why we're doing this show and how we're trying to reduce that stigma and have open conversations about mental health.
Uh, and the resources for NAMI are scrolling at the bottom of your screen. You can text their helpline, text helpline to 6264, reach their website at nami.org. You can also call their helpline at 1-800-950-6264. 1-800-950-6264. The next resource we share is from Mental Health America. And there are several stats on that page. One that stands out is, in talking about adults, 18% of adults have a mental health condition, which is over 43 million Americans. You can call or text 988 or chat 988lifeline.org. Their website is also mhanational.org. mhanational.org. And Sarah, sorry, go ahead.
I was just going to say, I just wanted to bust in and say, I think that this just again reiterates how important the work that you do is, Sarah, because I think there are this many adults that have mental health issues because they didn't have an outlet for therapy, for talking through, for having a safe space where they could talk about what was going on. And not that there's chemical imbalances in brains and things like that, that, cause anxiety and depression and trauma and all of that. But I think that number would probably be reduced if more individuals were able, between the ages of 13 and 23, to talk about what was going on.
I agree. And just talking about it more openly in general, which is why I'm so glad that you have this show.
Thank you.
For sure.
We always also include, and Sarah, you talked about this in your blog post as well, this stat from RAIN. Every 68 seconds, an American is sexually assaulted, which is just sobering. RAIN is the Rape, Abuse, and Incest National Network. They have a national sexual assault hotline, 800-656-HOPE, 800-656-HOPE. And their website is rain.org, RAINN.org. As we mentioned earlier, this is something that's important to both Dawn and I, and we'll be focusing on this a little bit more on our next show with Sam Collier on July 25th. The second and fourth Thursdays of the month is when you can find us on Facebook, Twitter, LinkedIn, YouTube, Instagram, and my website. One of the great things about the way we live stream the show is that if you joined us late, and there are a few people who did, because I know they were traveling, in particular Paula Kiger, another Digimentors colleague who has been incredibly supportive of all the work that I do, and was a producer for the New York Times Read Along for a number of years. She suffered through many a Saturday when I would call her in various states of neuroses when I was anxious about the show. I used to also call her after the shows when I was kind of process things. So thank you for that, Paula. But for folks who may have joined late, as soon as the show is over, you'll be able to watch it from the beginning on the same links, on the same channels that you're watching, on Dawn's Facebook page, my Facebook page, on LinkedIn, on YouTube, on Twitter. And it'll take a little while to get the videos up on Instagram, but we'll get the videos up on Instagram as well. It'll also be on my website. Dawn, we have a comment from a Jim Neuburg. I think you might know him.
We do. Yeah, he just said, fascinating stuff, Sarah. You really made me think about my own teenage years and how certain things formed who I became.
Which is really,
thanks, Jim.
Really great.
What's so interesting? People's reaction when I say I like working with teens tells me a lot about what their own teenage experience was like. I think if you have had a tough experience as a teenager and you haven't healed from that or processed that, when you grow up, it's kind of like this adverse reaction to teenagers. You're like, oh no, not middle schoolers, not teenagers. I could never. So awesome, Jim. I'm glad you're thinking about that. Thank you.
It's and I will ask the question, Sarah, because you're focused on teenagers. Do you also see younger students? How young do you go?
Oh my gosh, the youngest I've ever seen was 2, and that was wild. I usually see 5 and up. Wow. And those ages, I would say even teens if they allow it, but any child, it's really about the family and about parenting.
Sure.
Because if you want something to change, you have to get the whole family involved.
Sure.
I wanted to say though, speaking of parenting, Neil, you mentioned this in your blog about, I hope Emily still talks to me when she's a teenager.
Yeah.
I want any parents listening to know this. This is very important. They might talk to you less.
Yeah.
You might not be their trusted favorite person anymore.
Yep.
They might close themselves off. You're going to say, how was school? And they'll say, fine.
Yep.
I want you to know that's normal. That's actually a healthy developmental milestone that they have to navigate. And not just the teens, but as a parent, you have to navigate this milestone too. I see a lot of parents really get upset and really sad, because it is sad. Your little baby doesn't want to talk to you as much anymore, and try to double down and be more controlling. And what are you doing? Who are you talking to? That can backfire. And so,
Sure.
of course, make sure they're safe.
Sure.
But if that happens, I want you to almost celebrate it with a gleam in your eye, tongue in cheek, celebrate it and say, oh, good, my kid is exactly where they're supposed to be developmentally. They think I'm cringy. Good job.
She already thinks I'm cringy, but
well, you're a little cringy. It's fine.
I was gonna say we're all a little cringy, but Neil, you're a little cringy.
Ouch. No, but this coming from Sarah, who worked with me on my team. She knows me. She knows how I work. I want to give a quick shout out, but that is a good point, Sarah, and I will certainly keep that in mind. I want to give a special hello, and if I'm going to pronounce it right, a Hafa Adai, to Bobby Benavente from Guam. So this is the magic of social media and Facebook in particular. Bobby is someone that I worked with, must have been 30 years ago. I'm guessing it was 1997. So someone do the math for me. A long time ago, shortly after I graduated, I worked in public health and working on tobacco control in the Asian American community. Bobby, thank you so much for watching. It really means a lot that you took the time, saw this across your screen, and came in for a visit. So thank you. I appreciate that. Another old friend, Glenda Fataafe. So Glenda is a home care worker from Washington State, Sarah. So, before I joined United Way, I worked with the SEIU 775, representing home care workers and nursing home workers. And she is saying, she's referring to your comment, but they are hearing you, and one day we'll come back to talking to you.
Oh my gosh, Glenda, absolutely. I think too, an important thing, you can still spend one-on-one time with your team. That's very important, actually. That helps with behavior and your connection a lot, but you have to do what they want to do. Take them out to frozen yogurt, ask them what they're looking at on TikTok, have them show you some funny videos.
Sure.
Don't dictate what happens. Join in their world for just 10 minutes every couple of days.
I was just going to say, I've always said that the most amazing conversations I've had with my children are in the 10-minute car rides where they don't have to look me in the face.
Exactly.
Yep. That we've had some of the best conversations in those car rides, to where I can find out what's going on with them, because they feel the most comfortable that way.
Exactly. Perfect comment. Yeah. Thank you.
Another key thing would be to listen to TTPD with your daughter, just to get into what she's listening to. And Sarah knows what I'm talking about.
Yeah,
that's something to do with Taylor Swift, right?
The Tortured Poets Department.
Yeah,
Swiftie Dad.
The world,
Absolutely. But that, I think, adds to cringiness. So I'm not quite sure where the line is.
Well, don't dance to it, but
I'm not allowed to dance.
Absolutely.
In the open window, in the front window, like for everyone to see.
Absolutely.
Like walking by? No? Okay. Maybe I'll stop. My mom says, very good show for public education, public health, mental health, and mental health education. Thank you, Mom. Appreciate it. We are coming to the end of our show. We try and keep it to an hour. We can certainly keep going. But Bobby has a great comment right as we're talking about closing. Join in their world. So important for grandparents with grandchildren. Learning how to do this. Absolutely, Bobby. Thank you. Thank you so much. And Jonathan says this was an interesting show. Thank you. So as a reminder, we produce this show 2 times a month, the second and fourth Thursdays. We, when Dawn and I started talking about launching it, we very quickly realized we did not want to go weekly because that would just be too much. And this is the right pacing for us. Although every now and then I get inquiries. Wait, are you on this week or next week or when's your next show? I want to. So bear with us. The good news is that we have so much interest in the show in terms of guests that we are going to continue into 2025. We did not put a time limit on it when we started booking guests and thinking about topics. But we have guests booked into October of this year, and a number of people, at least a half a dozen folks who have already committed to being on the show. We just have to find a date for them. So we were going to keep doing this, and Sarah, there may be an opportunity to come back if you're interested to talk about teen boys. We can shift the conversation and focus on that. So once again, I want to thank Sara Wilson, a licensed marriage and family therapist, for joining us on this show, focusing on teen girls and therapy. Visit our website for more information. You can find not just the link for this show, but also blog posts and other shows. And certainly encourage you to join our Facebook group. And I'll be sending out that link by email and reaching out to folks individually, so we can continue supporting each other and sharing insights.
Thank you so much for having me. Thank you.
Really appreciate it.
It's been an honor to be here. And thanks for your wonderful questions, everyone. Wonderful discussion.
Absolutely. We'll see you in a few weeks. Thank you. Good night.